I heard you describe the chemotherapy, and after the chemotherapy, for you, I think, was a stem cell transplant.
Yes, it was.
Initially, anyway. And that was essential in order to achieve control over your condition and go into remission, I guess. What was this story of stem cell transplant for people who don't know anything about it, or for patients who are watching this for the first time?
Well, firstly, stem cell transplant, I didn't have a match in my family, so they tested my family, there was no match for me. So they had to go to the transplant register, which is, I think people will know Anthony Nolan. So Anthony Nolan found me a match through various blood tests and etc. And that match took about 5 or 6 weeks. So the period of time, I mean, I wasn't going to survive without a transplant because my disease would have come back. That's what they told me. So I needed a transplant very urgently. And the waiting time between finishing my chemotherapy and finding out if there was a match for me in the world was an intensely nervous time because I had got into remission, but any day the disease could have come back. So finally the telephone rang and my coordinator at the hospital said, we have a match for you. But even then that was more complex because it was a young man of 22 actually in London, so I was quite fortunate. But even then the process began of getting this guy in to do more tests, further tests to make sure that he was a suitable donor. And thankfully he was. And so that process began. They got his cells just before Christmas. So I was taken into an isolation unit to begin my transplant. And what that involved was basically to give me more aggressive chemotherapy, if I hadn't had enough already, to give me some really, really strong dose of that. So I had that for 10 days, 24/7 chemotherapy, to take me within an inch of my life, basically, to kill off my bone marrow, my existing bone marrow, which gave me the immune system, the great analogy is of a newborn baby. Okay, and I think we know how precious they are. So there was a 51-year-old guy in an isolation unit with the immune system of a newborn baby. So I had all the masks and everybody had suits on. It was like NASA, with people coming and going. But that was a very vulnerable time, of course. And then on the 17th of December, so I had an early Christmas present, my stem cells were sent across London on a motorbike from the Royal Free Hospital. And my new life began, and they were given to me through a drip into my system. So day +1 was the 18th, and my new system started to grow. So it was a very emotional time going through that sort of process. Being in a room in isolation is in itself quite humbling, actually. There's plenty of time to think about your life, where you're going, what you've done. And then to be given a chance, because at that stage it was only a chance. There was a possibility my body would have even rejected those new cells. And whilst the cells were growing, that was a dreadful process too, because there were times I didn't know whether to put my head over the basin or to sit on the toilet or do both. It was quite a tough time physically. It was 24/7 care. Everything that came out of my body was monitored. If you can imagine, you can't imagine how dehumanizing actually something like that can actually be. And I found that really hard to adjust to. But the team were brilliant. I had a wonderful team that looked after me. They were the same continuous care day in and day out. But that was a very, very tough process. Not just the physical angle of it, but actually the psychological angle. I was in there for 6 weeks. And I had visitors, but for a bulk of that time I was hooked up to drugs, different anti-rejection stuff, different vitamins and different minerals and that sort of thing to try and make me stronger, different foods I had to eat. It was a very, very tough time, I'd have to say.